Doug McDermott is your newest Sacramento King. Signs a one-year deal. That is from Shams. Last season, Doug McDermott spent time with the Spurs and the Pacers. He didn't start a game, but he played in 64. He averaged 14 minutes a game, and everybody wants to know about the three-point percentage. He shot 41% from three. He is a guy who's going to come in, hopefully make some shots for you. Got to survive on defense as well. Chris, from the free throw, he shoots it, weirdly enough, 57% from three, but I just don't think he gets to the free throw line very often.
He's an 80% for his career.
80% for his career, yeah. So maybe it was just the running around last season.
Didn't take many.
Yeah, didn't take many at all. But this is a guy who we just talked about the three-point shooting, and obviously we already talked about how a lot of that three-point shooting is coming from the bench. But hey, just bring more off the bench. And he was 41% from three last season. He's also 41% for his career. So that is pretty good true shooting there, Chris. Opening up the phone lines, 916-339-1140. From the 530 on the text line, love the pickup. People forget how good Doug is at shooting. He instantly becomes the Kings' best shooter. They haven't struggled to generate open looks, just needs dudes to hit them. So, yeah, not the time to debate whether he'll be the best or not, but he's definitely going to help the shooting category for the Sacramento Kings, who want to take a lot of threes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm looking at his numbers as a reserve throughout his career. He's played 561 games as a reserve. He started a handful, 94 comparatively, 8 points per game coming off the bench. He still shoots 41% from three coming off the bench. And you do like to see this as well. I'm looking at his starter versus reserve splits. It's pretty much the same numbers, which means he is who he is, and that's what you're going to get. And it's, if you play him more, you're just going to get a little bit of a blown out version of it. 47.1% as a starter from the field, 47.2% from the field as a reserve, 40.9% from three as a starter, 41 flat as a reserve. So again, you know what you're going to get when you get Doug McDermott in there. He averages about 20 minutes per game coming off the bench. So he's somebody who, even though he isn't really any knocked down a starting spot at any stop in his career long term, he's been somebody who you still want to have out on the floor, and I think that's incredibly important. He doesn't have too long of a playoff history or anything like that, but I think the fact that he's been there a couple different times in a role player position, I think is definitely a positive, as this team is probably going to need some people to step up in the playoffs. I don't think Doug's going to be the first person they look to, but I think the fact that he's been there, done that, and if I'm not mistaken here, I want to double check. I'm pretty sure Doug McDermott is now the second oldest player on this Kings team, only behind DeMar DeRozan.
He turned
crazy.
Yeah, he turns 33 in January. Somebody on the Sac chat asking, isn't he old? He's younger than you think. I mean, he's 32.
Like, he's also much younger than Jay Crowder and Robert Covington. So when I say he's relatively young, those are the other examples that I was thinking of.
Yeah, and obviously Doug McDermott, his name has come up, but were you at all surprised, Chris? You weren't necessarily convinced that Jay Crowder was the pick? His name just kept coming up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say I expected Jay Crowder to be the name that this ended up being. I just thought Doug McDermott made sense really almost solely because of the experience with Domas and Herter, and it sounded like both of those guys had really positive experiences with Doug McDermott. So honestly, it was more of the relationship part of it that made me more confident that at some point here, when he hit free agency, he was going to say, well, this team needs shooting. They rely on shooting to an extent. And I'm, a big body, it just makes a lot of sense for the Kings to want to go after. And so it just kind of always seemed like it was destined to happen at some point. And I would say that I'm probably a little bit surprised that it is happening right now. I definitely didn't think that this was going to be the guy that they ended up going for, but I feel like I'm about as satisfied as you can be with the list of names that were out there. I definitely think Doug McDermott is somebody who at least makes impact on a lot of teams that he goes to.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jay Crowder, they both, according to Basketball Reference, they're both 6'6". Obviously, they're different players. Jay Crowder, just turned 34 in July. So he's 30. He's,
okay.
Yeah. So
feels like he's been in the league longer than that.
Yeah. He's 34 years old. And I honestly, Chris, I thought he didn't play that much on the Bucks. So I checked to see who played more. I thought maybe even Dougie McBuckets played more than Jay Crowder. Jay Crowder last season because the whole thing was, I want more of a identity, right? That's why he wanted to get out of Phoenix, and it feels like you never actually see him playing. But Jay Crowder last season, I think a lot of it is due to injury. But Jay Crowder last season, Chris, he played in 50 games, so Dougie played in more, but he started 25 games, and in those games, just in total minutes played per game, he played 23.1. So he played about 9 more minutes than Dougie, and he started 25 more games than Dougie. Dougie played more games, but yeah, Jay Crowder definitely did have a decent amount of playing time last season. As far as his 3-point percentage, he shot it at 34, basically 35% last season. His career is right there as well, 34, 35%. So yeah, that's not going to happen anymore. Kind of surprising that Jay Crowder didn't work out, just because he's more that physical dude. But, in Monty we trust, and he likes what he saw from Doug McDermott when they, have discussed with him or talked with him, seen him work out, watched him work out, seen him play, and they think that's what they need. And I'm curious,
or
Chris,
Jay Crowder didn't want to come here,
or Jay Crowder didn't want to,
or didn't want to accept the role that was given after playing the Nick Young sound. It's very important to clarify.
That's true.
It has nothing to do with Sacramento. It just maybe, like you said, he started 25 games last year.
25 games.
Maybe he's saying like that opportunity, like they're talking about 9th, 10th man in Sacramento. I'm looking for something where I could maybe sneak in 20 games as a starter.
Right. We don't know, and we will know more if and when Jay Crowder does get signed somewhere. But yeah, I think, do you think that it's funny because we sit there and, some people will say preseason doesn't matter. Fans will say preseason doesn't matter. Some fans will get worked up about preseason. We started the show and I was fairly worked up about what we've seen from the Kings so far. Do you feel like Dougie McDermott moved up the Kings list due to how cold they've been in the preseason, or am I being way too simpleton there?
There's a chance that it definitely played a small impact for sure. Like, I mean, maybe they, just like you, maybe they had the same thought of, we think this team is good at shooting, but maybe we're not as good as what we thought. And, Monty McNair, I feel like, is definitely the kind of GM that seems to feel like you can't have enough shooting. Like, and a lot of teams feel that way, especially in today's era, that, if you're a shooter, you'll find your way out onto the floor. And I think, as we kind of went through Doug's minutes and games played and things like that, I think it's really clear that teams have a really hard time keeping him off of the floor. I mean, he played he's always kind of been a random night killer for a lot of teams. I do think, you mentioned Jay Crowder's ability to start. I do kind of feel like if Keegan goes down, and I think Trey Lyles would definitely be the first option, but I wouldn't be crazy upset with Doug McDermott getting starts. Now, I know defensively is really where you're going to feel the difference between a guy like Doug and Keegan, but I do think if you're just saying, hey, Doug, can you play a role while Keegan Murray is out for 15 games offensively? I do think Doug McDermott could maybe fill that role for a short period of time. But again, I think defensively is really where you're going to see Mike Brown and Doug McDermott probably be at odds. Like, I'm not entirely sure. I said Monty McNair likes enough. You can't have enough shooting on the floor. I don't know if Mike Brown feels that way. We know Mike Brown loves him some defense. That, again, might be a little bit of a push and pull, is maybe Monty McNair feels like, hey, this guy can be an impact player, has been an impact player for a lot of teams for a lot of years, and you're not going to play him because he doesn't play defense. Like, that can maybe cause maybe Doug to not have as big of a role as what we expect this year. But I think he's going to be an impact player.
Are we looking at this as a Sasha Vezenkov situation a little bit? I know,
sure.
I know Sasha, there was more.
Hopefully it goes better.
Well, I'm just wondering, do we think he'll get more playing time than Sasha did?
Probably around the same.
Yeah.
Maybe more. I mean, maybe more just because he's been established. He's like Mike Brown. The problem with Sasha was you put him in and you're learning as you're watching him, I think maybe Mike can say, look, I've gone against Doug McDermott. I mean, Doug McDermott was with the Spurs for a couple years. I know Greg Popovich obviously has a very similar mentality as Mike Brown. Maybe he is a little bit less of a defensive liability than what I'm putting on him. But I think that, I think that maybe that's a chance for sure.
Coming up next, we continue the conversation. Someone from the 401